get right out to Eric Shawn. He's got the very latest. He's outside the courthouse. And they seem to be going on every one of these counts guilty. They've agreed on all of it.
John, guilty on all counts, 18 counts: bribery, extortion, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, conspiracy for honest theft of services. Robert Menendez, a New Jersey Democratic power, senior senator from the Garden State, former chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a jury here moments ago deciding that, yes, he did sell his office. He sold the power of the Senate that he had in Washington, D.C. for $480,000 in cash bribes, as well as 13 gold bars found in his wife's closet, a Mercedes-Benz, and other lavish and expensive gifts, including dinners and jewelry and clothes, in order to sell his office and make money, corrupting his oath of office against the United States of America. The jury found that he acted as a foreign agent of Egypt, as well as Qatar, as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, interfering in U.S. foreign policy for his own personal benefit. It is one of the most stunning and devastating corruption cases that we have seen here in New York City in any recent time. A U.S. senator totally convicted on all counts. He faced 16, his two co-defendants, two businessmen who he also now, the jury says, illegally helped, also convicted. One of those businessmen obtained a license to sell halal exports to Egypt that corrupt, according to the jury, by Menendez. Of course, we made a lot has been made about those gold bars, earning him the nickname Gold Bar Bob. The defense tried to explain that, it was really his wife's gold bars and not his, because they were found in his wife's closet, locked away, and illegally her house, not his house. They also claimed that the $480,000 could be explained because, in their words, it was a, quote, Cuban thing. The senator's family fled from Cuba when Fidel Castro took over, and his sister testified that they kept cash in the grandfather clock in their house because the police would come in and raid their home. The only problem with that is that Mr. Menendez was not born in Cuba. He was born here in New York City. So the jury obviously saw through that as a lie. In addition, the defense tried to show that he did not take any bribes or any payoffs, and what he was allegedly doing was for his constituents, the two businessmen. But the jury obviously disagreeing with that and siding with the United States government in this devastating conviction and prosecution of a very powerful Democratic politician. Menendez is running for re-election as an independent. He did not as a Democrat. Democratic Congressman Andy Kim now running for election on the Democratic line. Menendez will face, from 20 years to potentially 200 years in prison if he is sentenced consecutively and not concurrently. Obviously, the thought would be he would be sentenced concurrently, so he could face 20 years in federal prison. As far as his wife, Nadine Menendez, her trial has been postponed indefinitely because she was charged. She is suffering from breast cancer. You know, there was some thought that the senator perhaps was emboldened after his acquittal in the last case. That happened in 2017. The corruption case, federal case, very similar to this one, in which he was acquitted on a hung jury. According to the prosecutors, this corrupt and illegal scheme started just a few months after that, in which he was dealing with the two New Jersey businessmen who are constituents, allegedly interfering with United States foreign policy on their behalf, also allegedly giving insider information to the Egyptian government, dealing with the Egyptian intelligence services and giving them information that they perhaps should not have had. The defense tried to say, no, this was all above board, that he was just trying to help. But, John, really a devastating sweep, total victory by the Justice Department, guilty on all 16 counts, 18 counts complete, that Robert Menendez did, said this jury, sell his office for cash and gold. So today, Gold Bar Bob is a moniker that sticks. John, back to you.
All right, Eric, Sanders with me here.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here as well, Eric, and we're going to try to get Chad Pergram up as well. Kerry Kupak will give us the legal analysis following this. Any reaction yet from Menendez himself and his team?
Waiting for the updates from our, let me just give me a second, because we have our producers upstairs in the courtroom and seeing if there's any reaction. Jeremy, anything on reaction of the senator? Nothing at the minute.
Okay.
Nothing on that. We expect him potentially to come down here and talk, and his lawyers at least to talk in a press conference or a statement. The clerk right now is reading back the verdict. This really was a very involved trial and very involved verdict sheet. Here is the verdict sheet in which the jurors had to sort through not just various charges relating to Menendez, but also the alleged involvement, now convicted, of those two businessmen and their involvement in this scheme. The FBI doing an amazing job. They even surveilled Menendez and his wife at a restaurant, overhearing what they were talking about when they were meeting with some of the co-conspirators in dealing with this. And of course, when they executed that search warrant in his home, found $480,000 in cash. They said even stuffed in his official jacket. As far as those gold bars are concerned, the defense tried to say, well, they were actually his family's gold bars, Mrs. Menendez's gold bars. But the problem with that is the serial numbers on some of those gold bars trace back to one of the businessmen here, showing that it was the businessman who was also convicted with him who bought those gold bars that were stashed in a safe locked in Mrs. Menendez's closet. So Bob Menendez will go down in history as yet another corrupt New Jersey politician, likely to potentially could be expelled from the U.S. Senate, forfeit his office. There's multiple felony conviction. It includes not only a conspiracy but obstruction of justice, which in which he allegedly tried to interfere in an investigation of one of the co-defendants, all for cash and gold bars.
Got it. And
Sandra?
that brings up a lot of questions over his future. Menendez convicted on all 16 counts he faced in this corruption trial. Eric is outside the courthouse there where this all just went down. Eric, thank you. We'll check back in soon. John?
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.